there a specific moment, like the moment where you felt betrayed?
He came home one night. Was my son born? I had 2 babies at home. And he has a pizzeria catering business. So he would usually end work around 9:30, 10 o'clock. And he started not coming home at night. Like, he'd walk in the door very late. So one night, he woke me up at 1:30 in the morning. And I'm like, what? And he's like, look at the clock. I said, why am I looking at the clock? It's 1:30 in the morning. He goes, I just wanted you to see that I didn't stay out so late. And I was like, what? Like, in his head, he was proud that he wasn't out till 3 o'clock in the morning. He was only out till 1:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And that's when I was like, oh my God. Like, there were so many other things, but that's when I really said, I've got nothing to work with here.
So how did you feel when you realized what you realized?
Empty. Maybe helpless. Hopeless. Just like, but there was part of me that knew I need to do something. I have 2 babies in this house.
So, what about physically? How did it impact you physically?
Oh, I was a disgusting mess. I was just, I know that doesn't sound nice, but...
Describe it, but I want to know what disgusting mess means.
I think my skin, like the stress, all was coming out through my body. Mm-hmm. Like, you could see my coloring was very off. Headaches I would get. My eating was awful. Mm-hmm. So I was probably 20, 30 pounds heavier. Mm-hmm. I just, sluggish. I would say, in a fog. Mm-hmm. It was just a recipe for disaster.
Do you remember any sort of physical feeling when he woke you up at 1:30 in the morning? was there a response?
Nauseous. Just, I remember thinking to myself, how on earth did I get here? Mm-hmm. How on earth did I allow myself to be with a man who disvalues myself and my kids and his home? Like, I was so nauseous. I was just like...
Yeah.
I wasn't brought up that way. I wasn't used to that. It was just... Yeah, it was a feeling of... I can tell you one thing. Despair.
Okay.
Despair was like...
What about mentally? What were some of your thoughts? What were you thinking? Right around that time.
I was thinking I have nothing to work with. I remember even one time he came home talking about wanting to sell cocaine. Mm-hmm. And I said, are you out of your mind? Like, I had people start knocking on my door looking for him. Very strange characters.
Yeah.
And I knew he was starting, and even one of the guys that he worked with said, yeah, he's starting to deal drugs. And I sat him down. I said, you cannot do this. And he's like, I'm not doing anything. I go, then why are you talking to me about selling and breaking stuff up? He says, that's the problem with you. He said, you don't want me to make money. I'm trying to do things for our family. I go, Mike, if you're in jail, I go, this is not an option. So I realized I had nothing to work with. I realized he was just very far gone. And that fun part of him, that was just a part of him that I was very much attracted to and I fell in love with. But I realized I was in love with maybe someone fictitious. You know, this is a wholeness of a person. I only knew a little part of it. And there was all this other stuff that I needed to deal with that I knew nothing about. Yeah. And every time I started to find more out, I was like, oh my God, I've gotten involved with someone that I have no clue what I got involved with. Wow. And I had a child, I have 2 children with him. Yeah. So I look at myself and I'm like, that's pretty pathetic, but I've truly stepped up, and I have 2 awesome kids. But I think if I was one of the women that remained the victim, my kids would have no shot at having a good life.
What a gift you gave them.
Yeah, And I think that has to do a lot too with my family. You know, I was brought up a certain way. Like I can even see with you, your values, or how you speak of your values in the groups. Like there's certain ways things are just not acceptable.
Absolutely. So what about emotionally? How did it impact you emotionally? Can you remember some? Like if you had to name some emotions you were feeling right around then, what would you say?
Despair was definitely one that always comes to me. Oh my God, such sadness. Because I really was in love with him. I really was. It was such heartache. He wound up, his partner's niece, who's 14 years younger than him, she would come and babysit my kids. And there was something, I was like, what's going on with her? He's like, nothing. He's with her now. They have 2 kids. He would, when the cat was out of the bag, he would pull up to my house with her in the car. And I'd be like, do you need to come here with her? And he says, what's the problem? The cat's, now you know. And like, he'd bring her in the house. Oh, it was awful. So feelings were, I felt very ugly. Very unwanted. I even know looking back, and I think maybe you have 2 daughters. I remember
2 girls, 2 boys.
When I had my daughter, I had emergency C-section. And the next day I was able to get out of bed, and I had to go in the shower. And I asked Mike to help me. And I'm trying to stand up in the shower, and he says, I can't help you. I said, why not? He goes, you're just so fat. He goes, and your scar. And Debbie, I will remember that till the day I die. And I even think of that. I'm like, oh my God, if someone spoke to my daughter like that, I went in the shower and I just sobbed. I thought that was one of the cruelest things someone had ever done to me.
Yeah.
And afterwards, like, I got out of the shower. I think I had a nurse come help me. And I just looked at him. I'm like, he goes, I can't apologize enough. He goes, you're just so different looking. He's like, I can't take it. And I was like, oh my God. Like I think back, I'm like, oh my God, that is so shitty.
Yeah.
But that, I think, shows the caliber of, or lack thereof.
Yeah.
But those were the emotions. I just felt very unwanted, very ugly, helpless, but on the same end, I knew I was the only one that could change it.
Yeah. So what about as far as, how did it impact you as far as either religion or spirituality just back then? We'll get to...
Right.
It did.
At that time, I really couldn't look at religion or spirituality because I had 2 babies at home, and I felt like every day it was just a matter of survival. I smoked. Oh my gosh. I smoked like I'd go in the garage and I'd smoke after the kids went to bed. I'd smoke before, like it was just like that was my vice, and I would just smoke and cry.
I get it. So what'd you do?
I talked to my parents, and my parents were like, whatever you need. And my mother never liked him even from the beginning. She's like, I knew it. I called it. But he was in the house with me for about 2 to 3 weeks. He was happy. He was whistling. He brings his girlfriend, in the car, brought it into the house. I'm like, get out of the house. So then we had one day where he wrote like these whole suicide notes and took off. And then I had to call the police, and the police went looking for him. And then they had to admit him to, was it Brookhaven, this whole big debacle. And that's when I had to get like an order of protection because I really didn't know. And he wound up being taken out of the house. And that's when we started the whole divorce. Oh, I think I served him with divorce papers prior to that. I did.
Mm-hmm.